All right, good morning. Good afternoon, everyone. Let's pray. Thank you, Lord, for Shabbat. Thank you for the rest that you've given to us. Thank you that we get to enjoy it. Thank you that we get to come and hear the truth of your word. Thank you, Father, for the encouragement of your word this week. I was reminded again today of what Nebuchadnezzar wrote and how he was humbled and how he just gave praise and glory and honor to your name, recognizing that you are sovereign over everything. I thank you for the example of Daniel and how he prayed and confessed the sins of our forefathers, and he was beloved in your sight. I pray, Father, that you'll help us to be humble before you, because we know that your word says you do not despise a humble, broken, and contrite spirit. You won't crush or bruise with reed or put out a smoldering wick. I pray for your strength today for people who are feeling weak. Thank you for reminding me again that with you we have everything. So help us to always keep that in our mind. You are the Creator. There's nothing that is too small for you. There's nothing that is hidden from you. Everything is naked and laid bare before you. All of our thoughts, all of our actions, everything is open before you. I thank you for conviction by your Holy Spirit. Continue to lead people, Father, to repentance. Give us understanding, open our minds, so that we may hear. I ask for wisdom for everyone, Father, that desires it. And I pray especially for JP today, that you will give him your words. Thank you again for loving us, Father. In Yeshua's name. Amen.
Okay, Torah portion, Shoftim then. It's an interesting Torah portion. This is kind of the theme that we're going to see throughout it is going to be that of leadership. And I want to look at the idea of leadership and what it is to make judgments and decisions on behalf of Yehovah, and the principles that he gives us to do those things. Because I think that kind of largely in the Torah movement, people have a desire to go back to the ancient paths and to do things as they used to be done, but they've kind of lost how that should be, and they've taken things from the way that the church was and things that they didn't like from how the church was, and now they're kind of trying to mash all of these things together, and they don't really understand what it should look like. So I want to look at that. And the first part, just to start with, I'm going to look at some stuff to do with keeping the feasts, which is stuff that we've not looked at before, and kind of changes some of the instructions that were given for how to keep these things. Then in the second part, I'm going to look at a narrative within Scripture from 2 Samuel, and something that Charlie mentioned the other day that he'd been reading. He was discussing what he'd seen, and I thought, wow, I need to go back and read that piece of Scripture. So I'm going to spend the second part reading over that and looking at how all of these themes are right there within it, how it looks at rulership from the human perspective, and then how we can see how Messiah will judge his people and how he leads his people from the situation that we're given there. And in the second part, I want to look at kings and what kings were restricted from doing, and why, and what it is to rely on certain things, what it is to rely on money, and what it is to rely on his name instead, and just the issues that are brought up from that. Well, the first verse we need to look at is Deuteronomy 16:8, because that's going to contain some new information in. But just to set the context of what's actually happening here, because we can dive right into the verses and be like, well, this is what is said. We can take information from it. But we need to recognize what's happening. Moshe is giving 1 of 3 or 4 speeches, depending on how you divide those things up, to the people who are just about to go into the land. So this is who he's speaking to, and this is what he says to them. He says, 6 days you eat unleavened bread, and on the 7th day there is a closing festival. Now you might have heard that translated as a solemn assembly. Okay, if you've read of the solemn assembly in Scripture and ever wondered what it is, that's what I'm going to look at. So it's a solemn assembly or a closing festival to Yehovah your Elohim. You do no work. So the word is atzara. So we need to understand what an atzara actually is, because how do we follow this? How do we take this as instruction in righteousness if we don't know what the words mean? Okay, so this is atzara, assembly, solemn assembly. It's not really what it's saying. If it's just saying this is an assembly, it's already said about this day, the 7th day of unleavened bread. It's already said this is a mikra. Okay, this is a holy convocation. We know that the word mikra is from the word kara, the verb kara, to call. So a mikra is people being called together. It's an invitation, basically. It's a calling together of his people. So these days are mikra. But there are some days, or a couple of days within them, that are actually atzara as well. Okay, so assembly, solemn assembly, just like understanding the word mikra, we need to understand that it comes from the verb kara, to call together. We need to understand this comes from a verb as well. It comes from the verb atzar. Okay, this is the verb atzar, to restrain, retain, close up, shut up. When you hear like they shut up the heavens, Yehovah shut up the heavens, this is the word that's used. Withhold, refrain, stay, detain. Okay, so this is what the verb means. Now this is Gesenius's Hebrew Chaldee lexicon on the word atzara. And I'm not going to read through it, but what I want you to take is that there is scholarly debate as to what this word actually means. Okay, some people are saying it just means an assembling together, which I would say it can't mean from the context. Some people saying that the restraint that's on the day is not being able to work. Okay, it's an atzara, you do no work. Well, that doesn't work, because sometimes it says it's a mikra, you do no work. The idea of doing no work on it isn't the restraint that's on the day. Okay, so this is Gesenius's lexicon on the word atzar, the actual root word. Okay, to shut. The primary idea is that of surrounding or enclosing, to hold back or to detain, to restrain by rule, to be restrained or hindered, to be gathered together from the idea of restraining or compelling. Okay, so this is what this day is, and it's all to do with this verb. Now, I'm going to go through the scriptures when this word is used, other than the ones that we've seen, because it's not used all that often. We can read all of the scriptures that it's used in. And what this word means, as we'll see, is it's a day upon which you are compelled to meet together. Okay, the kara, the mikra, is a day on which you are called or invited to meet together. So the Shabbat is a mikra. Okay, some days though you're called to meet together, but you are compelled to meet on those days as well. Leviticus 23 verse 8 describes this same day, the 7th day of unleavened bread. It says, and you shall bring an offering made by fire to Yehovah for 7 days. On the 7th day is a mikra, you do no servile work. So doing no servile work, not to do with the atzara, but it's also a mikra. So we're called to meet together on that day, but it's also described as a day upon which we must meet together. Joel 1 verse 14 says, set apart a fast, call an atzara, okay? Gather the elders, all the inhabitants of the land, all of them into the house of Yehovah your Elohim and cry out to Yehovah. Okay, so this is a response to something which they need to do. Call an Atzirah, get everyone together. Joel 2:15-16, blow a ram's horn in Sion, set apart a fast, call an Atzirah, gather the people, assemble the elders, gather the children and nursing babes, let a bridegroom come out of his room and a bride from her dressing room. Everyone, doesn't matter what they're doing, okay? Everybody has to go there, okay? If that's anyone online texting me, I can't read the text at the moment. So anybody that is called to one of these Atzirah must attend them. Okay, it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter what you're doing. You could be getting married, and we're going to see in some verses later that getting married is something that Yehovah excuses people from having to do other things for. So for an Atzirah, everyone has to be there. 2 Kings 10 verse 20 says, and Jehu said, set apart an Atzirah for Baal. So they proclaimed it. So it's not just for Yehovah that you can have an Atzirah. An Atzirah is this mandatory gathering. And Jehu sent throughout all Israel, all the servants of Baal came, so that there was not a man left who did not come. And they came into the house of Baal, and it was filled from end to end. So that's everyone. Okay, everyone attended. In Jeremiah 9 verse 2, we see a very interesting use of this word. It's used in a way to emphasize just how bad Israel are. It says, oh, that I had in the wilderness a lodging place for wayfaring men, and I would leave my people and go from them, for they are all adulterers and Atzirah of treacherous men. Okay, so it's used here to emphasize all of the treacherous men are there in Israel. That's how bad they are. They're an Atzirah of treacherous men. So the first day of unleavened bread is a mikra. The last day of unleavened bread is a mikra, but it's also an Atzirah. So it's a day that you must meet together. Leviticus 23:35-36 says, on the first day is a set apart mikra. You do no servile work. This is talking about Sukkot now. So the first day of Sukkot is a mikra. For 7 days you bring an offering made by fire to Yehovah. On the 8th day there shall be a set apart gathering for you, a mikra, and you shall bring an offering made by fire. It is an Atzirah. Okay, so they're both mikras, but on one day you are compelled to meet together. Everyone has to be there. So on the 8th day of Sukkot, everyone must be there. 6 days you eat unleavened bread, and on the 7th day there's a closing festival to Yehovah, an Atzirah to Yehovah. You do no work. Count 7 weeks for yourself. Begin to count 7 weeks from the time you begin to put the sickle to the grain. Okay, this instruction, count 7 weeks, we see with a bit more information in Leviticus 23. From the morrow after the Sabbath. Okay, so during unleavened bread, you've got the 7 days of unleavened bread. In any 7-day period, there's going to be a Sabbath. From the day after the Sabbath, which will be the first day of the week, from the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering, so it's the Feast of First Fruits, is the day after the Sabbath, you shall count for yourselves 7 tamim Sabbaths, 7 completed Sabbaths. So they're the 7 weeks. From that first day to the first Shabbat, 7 days, okay? And onwards to 49 days, and then the day after is the Feast of Shavuot. This is the Feast of Shavuot that it details here. And you shall perform the festival of weeks to Yehovah your Elohim, according to the voluntary offering from your hand, which you give as Yehovah your Elohim blesses you. Now this is a concept that we're going to see as we go through this. The voluntary offerings, okay, they brought various voluntary offerings. They brought the mincha offering, the peace offerings were voluntary offerings, burnt offerings could be voluntary offerings, but they were to give them as Yehovah blessed them. So in accordance with the blessings that they'd received, they were what they were to give. And you shall rejoice before Yehovah your Elohim, you and your son and your daughter and your male servant, your female servant, the Levite who is within your gates, the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow who are in your midst, at the place where Yehovah your Elohim chooses to make his name dwell. And we looked at how that was accommodated last week in the tithe. So for 7 years, the people would go up. In the third year, the tithe would be used to allow the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow to also go up. So in that 7-year period, all of these people that are detailed here would go up and they would eat before Yehovah. The Torah was also read 1 out of 7 years, and I would imagine that they would have done it on the year that everyone went up to the feast. I don't know that for a fact, but that's how I'd imagine that you'd do it. And you shall remember that you were a slave in Mitzrayim, and you shall guard to do these laws. So that's what all of the festivals were. Whether they're specifically said, when you go and you camp in tents, you're doing it to remember when they came out of Mitzrayim, or not, okay? It says you do all of these things to remember that you were a slave in Mitzrayim. And for us, we remember that we were a slave to sin. And now we've been set free to this life that we live now. And we're called to these things. And we go and we celebrate and we rejoice before Yehovah in all of the blessings that he brings in our lives. Perform the festival of booths for 7 days after the ingathering of the threshing floor and from your wine press. Okay, and that's again how we know that it's after the equinox that these things were done. Okay, you've got the Feast of First Fruits when the barley was ripe. This was done after the ingathering. And in order to gather in, or in order for things to be ripe, the equinox must have been. And you shall rejoice in your festival, you and your son and your daughter and your male servant, your female servant, and the Levite and the stranger and the fatherless and the widow who are within your gates. For 7 days you shall observe a festival to Yehovah your Elohim in the place which Yehovah chooses, because Yehovah your Elohim does bless you in all your increase and all the work of your hands, and you shall be only rejoicing. 3 times a year, all your males appear before Yehovah your Elohim in the place which he chooses, at the festival of unleavened bread, festival of weeks, and the festival of booths or Sukkot. And none should appear before Yehovah empty-handed. That's an interesting thing for it to say. None should appear before Yehovah empty-handed. It's not, you shall not appear before Yehovah empty-handed. The entire context of this is you do it in accordance with how Yehovah blesses you. And he's basically saying, look, if you've been doing the commandments, if you've been walking righteously, then you shouldn't appear before him empty-handed. And we can see that from the next verse. It says, but each one with the gift of his hand according to the blessing of Yehovah your Elohim, which he's given you. Just like when it says there should be no poor in the land. And then it goes on and says, and when there is poor in the land, because he knows what they're going to do. Appoint judges and officers, okay, Shoftim and Shoftim, within all your gates, which Yehovah your Elohim is giving you, according to your tribes, and they shall judge the people with righteous judgment. Okay, so this word here, Shoftim, is the plural of this word here, shafat. And shafat's a weird word in Hebrew, because shafat is actually a verb. Usually you would get the name for someone like a judge. You get that from the verb, but it would be a different word. It would be a noun. Here, somebody who judges is called by the verb a judge. That's shafat. The plural of that is shoftim. And what they're to judge according to is mishpat, from the same word. Just like mikra is from kara, mishpat is from the verb to judge. So what it is righteous justice, just judgment, right ruling. There's loads of different translations, but it's basically Yehovah's system of justice. What it's saying is that these people are to judge things according to how Yehovah would judge things. And there's the judges and there's the officers as well. And we'll see more about these groups of people. In 1 Chronicles 23, 2-4, it says, and he gathered all the rulers of Israel with the priests and the Levites. And the Levites were numbered from the age of 30 years old and above, and their number head by head was 38,000 males. Of these, 24,000 were to oversee the work of the house of Yehovah. 6,000 were officers and judges, okay? Shoftim and Shoftim. So the ones that David chose, and the ones that we see, in fact, all the way through the scriptures, primarily, not the only people who could be, but primarily the people who were judging were the Levites, so the priests. They were the people who knew the Torah. Because one of the things that we're going to look at is the idea that the people didn't have their own copy of the Torah. In the system that Yehovah set up, he set up the teachers of the law to be living among Israel, to teach the law to them, and the priests also to know the law. So who is it that you would go to judge with mishpat, to know the law of Elohim? It would be the Levites who were the judges. And that's what we see throughout the scriptures. Deuteronomy 19:16-18 says, when a malicious witness rises up against any man to accuse him of turning aside, then both men who have the dispute shall stand before Yehovah, before the priests and the judges who serve in those days. Again, who are you going to go to? Who actually knows the Torah? Okay, in the system that Yehovah set up. And the Shoftim shall diligently search and see if the witness is a false witness, who has falsely accused his brother. And we're going to get into these issues, how it is that Yehovah wants strife, contention about either party to party or things that are in the word. How is it that he wants these things dealt with? And something I want to introduce as an idea is that these people are human beings, okay? They're fallible. They're not guaranteed to make the absolute right judgment in every case, but that was not required. All it was required was Yehovah had set these people up and said, I've appointed these people and they're going to judge according to the word. There was no guarantee that they would always be right, but that's what Yehovah instituted. Exodus 5 verse 6 says, and the same day Pharaoh commanded the slave drivers of the people and their foremen. What I want you to recognize is this is the same word. Okay, we think, oh yeah, the foreman in Egypt. It's the same word, the same Hebrew word, Shoftim. Deuteronomy 1 verse 15 says, and I took the heads of your tribes, wise men and known, and made them heads over you, leaders of thousands, leaders of hundreds, leaders of 50s, leaders of 10s, and Shoftim for your tribes. And these were the people who were involved, the leadership within the tribes who would make these judgments over the people. Joshua 1:10-11 says, and Yehoshua commanded the officers, the Shoftim of the people, and he said, pass through the midst of the camp and command the people, saying, prepare food for yourselves. So if you can imagine that Moshe was receiving these instructions from Yehovah, and then he was relaying them to the people. There were 6 million men who were there, never mind the women and children. Okay, he would have needed help in telling people. You think about the actual logistics of how he would have done that. So appoint judges and officers within all your gates, which Yehovah your Elohim is giving you, according to your tribes, and they shall shafat the people with righteous mishpat. Do not distort mishpat. Do not show partiality, nor take a bribe, for a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and twists the words of the righteous. Another reason why it would be good, like in my eyes, me looking at the situation, for the Levites to be the judges, because the Levites would not have had any business association with any of their brothers or anything like that. So they would have no skin in the game, so to speak. Follow righteousness alone, so that you live and inherit the land which Yehovah your Elohim is giving you. But basically what's being told to them is, you will judge these matters as if you are Yehovah. Okay, from his word, from his principles, that is how you judge these matters. Do not plant for yourself any tree as an Asherah near the altar of Yehovah your Elohim that you make for yourself. Now this is interesting when we think about what Paul said about eating meat sacrificed to idols. Okay, do not plant for yourself any tree as an Asherah. Is it a problem to plant a tree? No, of course. Is it a problem to plant a tree as an Asherah? Of course it is. Okay, the tree isn't the problem. The problem is what's in your mind when you plant the tree. 1 Corinthians 8 verse 7, Paul says, however, not all have this knowledge, but some, being aware of the idol, until now eat it as having been offered to an idol. Okay, do not plant any tree as an Asherah. So their conscience being weak is defiled. So he acknowledges that it's wrong to eat something as having been offered to an idol. Just like it would be wrong to plant a group of trees if you were going to go and worship a false god in them. You want to go and plant a group of trees though? Not a problem. Let's say you plant a group of trees, okay? Let's say that you come into an inheritance of a group of trees. And it's a group of trees that people have previously used to go and worship false gods in. Would it be good for you as a believer to have that grove of trees in a land where people associated it with pagan practices? Well, of course it wouldn't, because they'd all think, what's JP doing with the grove of trees? You know, that's really not on. So what Paul's getting across is that it would be lawful for me to have a load of trees. That wouldn't break the Torah. What would not be profitable, however, would be to have them if people's consciences were going to be defiled by seeing me with the group of trees that they thought that I worshipped false gods in, because they don't have that knowledge. 1 Corinthians 10 verse 23, all is permitted me, but not all do profit. Otherwise, there's going to be things that are permitted according to the Torah that still might not be a good idea to do. Revelation 2 verse 20 says, but I hold against you that you allow that woman Isabel, who calls herself a prophetess, to teach and lead my servants astray. And this is a verse that people confuse, and they say, well, this is what Paul's doing. Okay, because listen what this woman is teaching and leading his servants astray in. To commit whoring and to eat food offered to idols. Where food's not there, just to eat what's offered to idols, basically. Okay, so people will say, well, this is what Paul is doing. He's teaching people to eat food offered to idols. But we need to read this carefully to see what's actually being said here. Paul isn't teaching people to commit whoring and eat food offered to idols. If you are committing whoring with the idol and eating food offered to it, then you're eating that food as food or meat offered to an idol. That's not what Paul says. Paul says, therefore, my beloved ones, flee from idolatry. And then he says, no, but what the Gentiles offer, they offer to demons and not to Elohim. And I do not wish you to become sharers with demons. You're not able to drink the cup of the master and the cup of demons. You're not able to partake of the table of the master and of the table of demons. Do we provoke the master to jealousy, this whoring, this fornication with false gods? That's what Yeshua is saying is a problem. Being aware of the idol, that's the problem. Eating it as having been offered to an idol. He says that that's wrong, and that's exactly what Yeshua says is wrong. Committing whoring or fornication, eating it as food offered to an idol. Yeshua and Paul are in exact agreement on that point. So do not plant for yourself any tree as an Asherah. Plant trees, that's fine, just don't do them as Asherahs. Near the altar of Yahovah your Elohim that you make for yourself. Do not set up a matzevah, which Yahovah your Elohim hates. Now this is an interesting command to have in proximity to this one, because we know when we went through Genesis, we saw Yahovah says, I'm the ale of Bethel where you anointed the matzevah. Yaakov anointed the matzevah to Yahovah and says, do not set up a matzevah, which Yahovah hates. But here we have Yahovah, and he's possibly associating himself with it. Now this could be a couple of different things. Okay, it could be just like what Paul is saying, and do not set up a tree as an Atzerah. Do not set this up, a pillar of this type, as a matzevah, okay, as something which has this pagan context. It could be that this is what's going on here. Could also be just Yehovah's grace. Okay, we know that the law was added because of transgressions. We know that the patriarchs did a load of things that really weren't good, and that the law legislates against afterwards. So it could be either. But I think it's interesting that it appears in this context. Okay, do not plant for yourself any tree as an Asherah near the altar of Yehovah your Elohim, because as Charlie's looked at when he looked at syncretism, this mixing of worship, what they were doing is they were taking these ways of worshipping the pagan gods, and then they were worshipping Yehovah through them, and they were mixing his name with the name of Baal. Do not set up a matzevah which Yehovah your Elohim hates. Do not sacrifice to Yehovah your Elohim a bull or sheep which has any blemish, any evil matter, for that is an abomination to Yehovah your Elohim. This all seems to be of the sort of things which are worshipping Yehovah in a way that is not legal according to Torah. When there is found in your midst, in any of your cities which Yehovah your Elohim is giving you, a man or woman who does whatever is evil in the eyes of Yehovah your Elohim, in transgressing his covenant, and this is an interesting statement to me as well. I definitely subscribe to the idea of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil as being when man departed from a kind of a truth and falsity view of good and evil. Yehovah has said that this is evil, so it's evil. When they ate of the tree, they began to decide for themselves what good and evil was. Eve saw the fruit, that it was good. Okay, so she decides that she's going to take of this fruit and eat it. So Yehovah said that it's evil. Man now decides that it's good. So I subscribe to that. So the idea that we have throughout Torah is someone who does what is evil in the eyes of Yehovah, because that is what is evil. And has gone and served other gods and bowed down to them, or to the sun or the moon or any of the host of the heavens, which I have not commanded. And it has been made known to you, and you have heard and have searched diligently. Then see, if true, this matter is confirmed, that such an abomination has been done in Israel. Okay, so the people who were diligently searching in these cases, as we saw before, and we'll see later, were the judges. They would diligently search to see if it was true. Then you shall bring out to your gates that man or woman who has done this evil matter, and you shall stone to death that man or woman with stones. At the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses shall he that is to die be put to death. He is not to be put to death by the mouth of 1 witness. The hand of the witnesses shall be first against him to put him to death, and the hand of all the people last. So you shall purge the evil from your midst. And there are many things that people misunderstand about the death penalty in Torah, but this contains a couple of really important ones. Okay, so if you were going to accuse somebody of something and it was going to carry the death penalty, you couldn't be the only witness. There had to be more than 1 witness. The hand of the witnesses were to be first against them. So people, when they deal with the death penalty, when people say things about the death penalty, they'll say, well, what about when a false accusation is brought? Okay, if you just bring these people out, false accusation, and then you've got the death penalty, that's pretty permanent. If you were going to do that, you couldn't just go to the police station and say, this person's done this thing worthy of death, and then the police go around and arrest them, and then they go to the judges, and then the judges deal with them, and then they're finally put to death. Okay, because there's a great distance there, isn't there, between you and the actual carrying out of the punishment. If you were going to accuse somebody of something, you knew that it carried the death penalty. You knew that you were going to be the first one with a stone in your hand, smashing them in the face, killing these people. Okay, and not only you, but all of the other people who would come forth as witnesses against them. It's kind of a great deterrent to people. You know, you've actually got to think about what's going to be carried out here. So at the mouth of 1 witness, false witness, you know, maybe someone hates somebody, can't be done. 2 or 3 witnesses who are all prepared to pick up stones and kill the person. It says, you shall not let your eye pity somebody. If you know that they're guilty, don't let your eye pity them. because that's human nature, isn't it? You don't want to go out and kill somebody. You do not let your eye pity them. But as for a false accusation being brought, it's a lot less likely. So I want to look at the offenses for which the death penalty is enacted, because if we're going to understand Yehovah, we're going to understand who he is, and we're going to understand what justice is in his eyes, this is something that we really need to come face to face with. Genesis 9 verse 6, okay, the first time death penalty is instituted when Noah comes out the ark. Whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood is shed. Okay, so for murder, death penalty. For in the image of Elohim has he made the man. Leviticus 27:28-29 says, however, whatever a man lays under ban for Yehovah, this is to devote something to destruction. Yehovah says these certain things should be devoted to destruction when you go in. I want you to kill these people, and I want you to destroy all of the things that they have. Of all that he has, man and beast, or the field of his possession, is not sold or redeemed. Whatever is laid under ban is most set apart to Yehovah. And once it's set apart to Yehovah, when something is holy to him, then you can't touch it, and you can't deal with it as yours anymore. No one under the ban among men, is ransomed, but shall certainly be put to death. Okay, so if it was just stuff, if it was sheep or goats or whatever, then you could pay a certain price, and then it would be taken out from being devoted to destruction. But if it was a man, they're certainly to be put to death. And it's interesting how Yehovah tells us that we're to view these things that have been put under the ban. You do not bring an abomination into your house, or you have been utterly devoted like it. You do utterly loathe it and utterly hate it because it's devoted. Okay, so we're to take the way that we view things in the world, and we're to conform them to how Yehovah views things, which is why it's so important to look at his mishpat, which is why it says your eye shall not pity these people, because we are to, we're prone to being pitying towards people, to being tolerant towards people. You see it all throughout society now, extreme tolerance. Well, Yehovah says, you utterly loathe these things and you utterly hate them. I have devoted them to destruction. What do you think that means about this thing? Do you think you have to then take it into your house and say, oh no, this gold and silver, I quite like gold and silver, I'll have it. That's exactly what Achan did in the book of Joshua. Deuteronomy 13 verse 5 says, and that prophet or that dreamer of dreams is put to death because he's spoken apostasy against Yehovah your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim, redeemed you from the house of bondage, to make you stray from the way in which Yehovah your Elohim commanded you to walk. Thus you shall purge the evil from your midst. And it's exactly the same with these things. This is something that has been devoted to destruction. We're very kind of prone to saying, oh, what they're saying is trying to lead people away from following the commands of Yehovah, but maybe we should be tolerant of it, maybe we should allow, maybe they'll change, maybe if we pray for them, Yehovah will open their eyes and they'll be, no. Purge the evil from your midst, get rid of it. You shall utterly loathe it and hate it because it's been devoted to destruction. See these things as Yehovah sees them. The prophet who presumes to speak a word in my name which I have not commanded him to speak, or who speaks in the name of other gods, even that prophet shall die. People are so ready to say, oh, this is what Yehovah said, or Yehovah said this to me, or he showed me this, or he showed me that. We're to be extremely, extremely careful over what we say. We should not presume to speak on Yehovah's behalf, always with a caveat, maybe I think maybe he's shown me this, I'm not sure, whatever, but we don't presume to speak in his name and on his behalf. It carries the death penalty. A man or woman in whom there is a medium or who are spiritists shall certainly be put to death. They are to stone them with stones. Their blood is upon them. This is another component of it. Okay, the land was defiled by any blood that was shed upon it. And if someone sheds blood, then by man, their blood has to be shed. But in cases like this, where the death penalty is instituted, their blood is upon them. They're the ones who bear the guilt for it. Do not allow a practicer of witchcraft to live. So all of these spiritual practices, all of these means of finding out information from the spirit realm, were to go to Yehovah instead for these things. So if anyone comes along and they're trying to tell you that Yehovah says differently, that he's got a different message, or they're trying to lead you away to stray from the way in which he'd have you to walk, they're to be put to death. If mediums, spiritists, people who practice witchcraft, all of them are deserving of death to Yehovah. Work is done for 6 days, but on the 7th day it shall be set apart to you, a Sabbath of rest to Yehovah. Anyone doing work on it is put to death. This is how he would have the human beings that are on the earth institute justice for him. Okay, so for the death penalty to be carried out, it would be the judges that carried it out. But if people escape this, because we don't have this on the earth now, what do you think is going to happen when they stand before Yehovah and they're either going to receive eternal life or the second death? This is how Yehovah will judge things. Okay, anyone doing work on the Sabbath day is put to death. We can think, oh, I'll escape it. I'll escape it because, what's he going to do to me? He's going to strike me dead? No, I've just gone and I've worked. And there was no consequence to it. People forget that this is how Yehovah views things. Work on the Sabbath day, it's deserving of death. When the dwelling place is to go forward, the tabernacle, the Levites take it down, the Levites set it up, the stranger who comes near is to be put to death. Okay, so the stranger, as we've looked at before, is anyone who's not a Levite in this case, anyone for whom it would be illegal to do these things. They're put to death. This is the dwelling place of Yehovah. It cannot be defiled. Appoint Aharon and his sons, and they shall guard their priesthood. The stranger who comes near shall be put to death. So in this case, even if it's a Levite, anyone other than Aaron and his sons who comes near to these holy objects, holy to Yehovah, really doesn't get what's going on, they're to be put to death. They cannot come near and defile the dwelling place of Yehovah. When a man is found lying with a woman married to a husband, then both of them shall die. Both the man that lay with the woman and the woman, thus you purge the evil from Israel. People, it just baffles me that people look at things like this and they think, I'm glad that we don't follow the God of the Old Testament anymore. And I look at the world and I think, really? Are you? You glad that that's not a standard that we've got anymore? That it's just not okay to do that on pain of death? When a girl who is a maiden is engaged to a husband, and a man finds her in the city and lies with her, then you shall bring them both out to the gate of that city. So you bring them to these Shoftim and Shotarim, to the priests, and shall stone them to death with stones. The girl because she did not cry out in the city, and the man because he's humbled his neighbor's wife. Okay, so you find some people sleeping together. The girl says that she was raped. Well, if she's in the city and there were people around to have heard, then probably not. Okay, but if a man finds the girl who is engaged in the field and the man seizes her and lies with her, he rapes her, then only the man who lay with her shall die, but you do no matter to the girl. The girl has no sin worthy of death. And that's something for us to reckon with, that these sins are worthy of death. These people who do these things are worthy of death. And they're as worthy of death today as they were when Yehovah instituted them, including breaking the Shabbat. For the matter is like a man who rises against his neighbor and kills him. Okay, so like a man would kill somebody else, that's how this man has acted to the girl in seizing her and raping her. For he found her in the field, and she cried out, the engaged girl, but without anyone to save her. When any man takes a wife and shall go into her, and shall hate her, and shall make abusive charges against her, and bring an evil name on her, and say, I took this woman, and when I came to her, I did not find her a maiden. So people get this command all backwards. What they think it's about is that a man has the right to accuse somebody of not being a virgin, and if he can do that, and her parents can't bring out any proof that she was a virgin, then she's to be stoned to death. But I want you to notice what this is saying. Who is the person that is being addressed in this? A man that takes a wife goes into her and hates her. He makes abusive charges against her, brings an evil name on her. Okay? It's about the man, and the man bringing the false charges. Then the father and the mother of the young woman shall take and bring out the proof of the girl's maidenhood, virginity, to the elders of the city at the gate. So, if somebody's done this, they brought an evil name upon somebody, then the matter that it's taken before the judges is the girl's parents going to prove that this is not the case. It's not something that has to be proven, but if they can prove it, and they can prove that he's guilty, then the following happens. The girl's father shall say to the elders, I gave my daughter to this man as wife, and he hates her. And see, he has made abusive charges against her, saying, I did not find your daughter a maiden, and yet these are the proofs of my daughter's maidenhood. And they shall spread the garment before the elders of the city. Okay, again, it's not required of them if these charges have been brought. It's only required of them if they wish this man to be punished. And the elders of that city shall take that man and punish him. It's all about the fella. Find him 100 pieces of silver, give them to the father of the young woman, because he has brought an evil name on a maiden of Israel, and she is to be his wife, and he is not allowed to put her away all his days. What, so she's got to be his wife forever after he's slagged her off? That's not what it says, is it? Okay. Women could put men away too. Yeshua speaks of women putting men away. What it's saying is, he is not allowed, on the basis of these false charges, to put her away as his wife. But if the matter is true, that the girl was not found a maiden, in the case that they've brought this case against the man, and it's turned out that she wasn't actually a virgin, then they shall bring the girl out to the door of her father's house, and the men of her city shall stone her to death with stones, because she's done wickedness in Israel to whore in her father's house. Thus you shall purge the evil from your midst. Remember what was necessary to do this. Not at the mouth of one witness. Okay, the fella couldn't bring this against her. At the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses who said that this girl was not a virgin, after these people have brought a case against the man, and it's been found to not be true. This is the penalty. Okay, so don't bring cases against people and say, oh yeah, we're just going to bring it against them because maybe it'll be found that he slandered her, and then that'll be better for her. No, if you know that that's actually the case, don't bring the case against him, because maybe then your daughter's going to be brought out and stoned. But again, there's a very, very high standard that's necessary to prove these things. Leviticus 20 verse 14 says, a man who marries a woman and her mother, it is wickedness. They are burned with fire, both he and they, that there be no wickedness in your midst. Okay, there's only a couple of offenses which carry this penalty of being burned with fire. But what would it actually do? What would this command actually bring about in the society? Is there going to be anybody who's marrying a woman and her daughter and her mother? Okay. Is there going to be anybody? If you know that this is the penalty, are there even going to be any marriages taking place in the first place? Of course there aren't. It's not about burning people with fire. It's about establishing a standard of righteousness. And a man who has intercourse with a beast, he shall certainly be put to death, and the beast you kill. And a woman who approaches any beast and mates with it, you shall kill the woman and the beast. They shall certainly be put to death. Their blood is upon them. Again, okay, seems fair enough to me. I mean, I don't know what effect it has on an animal if you have intercourse with it, but obviously Yehovah, who knows all of these things, says the animal too must be killed. A man who lies with his uncle's wife. Okay, so a man who marries a woman and her mother. This is different, okay, of course. A man who lies with his uncle's wife, he's uncovered his uncle's nakedness, and they bear their sin. They die childless. A man who takes his brother's wife, it is uncleanness. He has uncovered his brother's nakedness. They died childless. Okay, so we can see that Yehovah's got this sliding scale of what is just in all of these cases. It's another great example of where Paul takes the idea that the Torah applies to somebody while they're alive from. Because after someone has died, the Torah mandates, or doesn't mandate, it says that you can take your brother's wife after that point, that he is to take the wife into the household. However, while he's alive, he can't do that. So we can take from that the Torah is only in effect over somebody as long as they are alive. Leviticus 20 verse 17, and a man who takes his sister, his father's daughter, or his mother's daughter, and sees her nakedness, and she sees his nakedness, it's wickedness, and they shall be cut off from before the eyes of their people. And it's actually, we can't actually tell what this means. Does it mean that they are to die? I would say that probably, given the relationships involved and the rest of the context, it probably does. But often this being cut off means to be isolated, or to be shunned, or whatever the word is, to be exiled from the community. And can mean both in the scriptures. Leviticus 18, 21 to 22 says, and do not give any of your offspring to pass through to Moloch, and do not profane the name of your Elohim. I am Yehovah. Do not lie with a male as with a woman. It is an abomination. So these two things follow one on from another. And it says, for whoever does any of these abominations, those souls who do them shall be cut off from among the people. So both of these things, again, I would suggest that it's probably the death penalty in this case too. Letting your offspring pass through to Moloch, which would be to burn them alive. And lying with a male as with a woman, it's an abomination. If you do them, you're cut off from the people. Leviticus 21 verse 9 says, and when the daughter of any priest profanes herself by whoring, she profanes her father, and she's burned with fire. Okay, one of the few, or the couple that there are of these offenses. But again, what's the result going to be? Is it going to be that on every street corner there's pyres with daughters burning? Of course not. It's just going to be that none of this sort of nonsense happens. Exodus 21, 28 to 29 says, when an ox gores a man or a woman to death, then the ox shall certainly be stoned, and its flesh is not eaten. And the owner of the ox is innocent. You've got an ox that happens to kill somebody, not your fault. However, if the ox was previously in the habit of goring and its owner has been warned, he's not kept it confined so that it's killed a man or a woman, the ox is stoned and its owner also is put to death. Fair enough, isn't it? You've been warned that your ox might kill somebody. You don't do anything about it. It kills somebody. You are to blame. Exodus 21, 15 to 17. He who smites his father or his mother shall certainly be put to death. He who kidnaps a man and sells him, or if he's found in his hand, shall certainly be put to death. And people love to say that the Bible says that slavery is fine. Okay? And the concept that they have of slavery is this. Okay, taking somebody by force and selling them. Slavery in the Bible was quite simply when somebody was too poor to sustain themselves, that they could sell themselves into somebody's service. And that would be for the period of 7 years. And in the 7th year, they would be let free with enough stuff to go on and establish a life for themselves. Slavery, as we know it, is forbidden. And he who curses his father or mother shall certainly be put to death. And again, we've got to remember when we look at these things, that these are people that Yehovah says are worthy of death. Right now, anyone who does any of these things in Yehovah's eyes are worthy of death. Okay? Cursing your father or mother is worthy of death. Deuteronomy 21, 18 to 21 says, when a man has a wayward and rebellious son who is not listening to the voice of his father or the voice of his mother, and who when they have disciplined him does not listen to them, then his father and his mother shall take hold of him and bring him out to the elders of his city, to the gate of his city, and shall say to the elders of his city, this son of ours is wayward and rebellious. He's not listening to our voice. He is a glutton and a drunkard. Then all the men of his city shall stone him to death with stones. Thus you shall purge the evil from your midst. Let all Israel hear and fear. So this is the purpose of it. so that everybody knows. Okay, don't be doing that, because this is the result. Obviously not a young child, a glutton and a drunkard. But when the child gets to a certain age, when they're rebellious, they're a glutton, they're a drunkard, they're not listening to their parents, then this would be a consequence. It's very different to the idea of, oh, I'm going to call child protective services if you don't leave me alone. Maybe we'll take you out to the elders of the city. How do you feel about that? Society would be very different, wouldn't it, if these things were instituted? Romans 1 verse 32 is interesting for us when we're considering these things. I'll come to an end in a second. Who, though they know the righteousness of Elohim, that those who practice such deserve death, not only do the same, but also approve of those who practice them. Okay, so we know that all of those things that we've looked at, those people are deserving of death. Okay, but something that I've considered, and particularly this week actually, the idea that when we take things in as entertainment, we look at things that contain sin, we look at TV programs, okay, we look at films or computer games or whatever it is, okay, that contain sin, we're approving of those who practice in them. We're taking it in as entertainment. And we might well watch it and go, oh, it's terrible, isn't it? Look at the terrible things that they're doing. But we're taking it in as entertainment. We're liking it. We're deriving pleasure from doing it. And it's just something that we should bear in mind. Deuteronomy 21, 22 to 23 says something that's interesting that we'll finish on this passage. It says, when a man has committed a sin worthy of death, okay, we know the righteousness of Elohim, that those things are worthy of death, same concept. Then he shall be put to death, and you shall hang him on a tree. This is part of the death penalty that I don't think people reckon with quite so much. Let his body not remain overnight on the tree, but you shall certainly bury him the same day. For he who is hanged is accursed of Elohim, that you do not defile the land which Yehovah your Elohim is giving you as an inheritance. So when somebody receives the death penalty, they're to be hung on a tree to show that they're accursed of Elohim, to show that the land is not defiled by their blood, because they are actually accursed of Elohim. And it goes back to that concept that we were looking at before of you shall not take anything into your house. Okay, if it's devoted to destruction, you shall utterly loathe it and you shall hate it. These people, all the people who commit any of these things, we ought to have the same mindset towards them as Elohim. And that's what the judges were there for. Okay, they were there to mete out this justice, the way that Yehovah said things actually were, rather than man having this idea of good and evil in their minds and saying, oh, maybe we'll let them off with this, or maybe we'll send them to prison for 12 years and when they come out maybe they'll be better, or whatever notions we have in our head. Yehovah's system was very different, and we'll look at how it was instituted in the second part.